Hello, it's Desiree Nielsen, dietitian once again, and today we are going to talk about the connections between your microbiome and your mental health. You may have heard your gut referred to as your second brain, and there's a very specific reason for that. Your digestive tract is heavily innervated, meaning it has a lot of neurons, which are the message carrying cells of the nervous system. In fact, there are so many neurons in your gut that there's actually more of them in your gut than there are in your spinal cord. And there is a lot of two-way communication between your first brain and your second brain. But you might be surprised to know that the vast majority of it, as much as 90% of the communication between the gut and the brain, is actually coming from the gut to the brain and not the other way around. Now, of course, what happens in our brain can affect what goes on in our gut. If any of you have IBS or Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, you know that if you go through a period of significant stress, your gut is probably going to get a lot worse. So that's what's happening in your brain, affecting what's going on in your second brain. However, what is happening in your digestive tract, and particularly what's going on with your gut microbiota, the trillions of microbes living in your digestive tract, can have a huge impact on what is actually happening in terms of your cognitive function or your mood. We saw this in a sort of classic sense in these microbiota transfer experiments. So the idea being you have a set of animals who are well, and you have a set of animals who have a specific trait. Maybe they have depression or anxiety. If you take the microbiota from those animals with depression or anxiety and you transfer them to the animals who are well, will you also see a transfer of those psychological traits? The answer is yes. Which really kind of blows my mind, all pun intended. Now, this is not to oversimplify. Mental health and well-being is incredibly complex. Especially in 2020, there's so much going on. We are exposed to so much fear and stress and uncertainty. So I do not want to oversimplify this by saying, oh, hey, change your gut microbiome and instantly all your problems will be solved. That is incorrect. However, taking care of our mental well-being is really holistic. It encompasses all sorts of aspects from diet to our microbiome. So I just want to introduce this topic as something to think about when you're on the path to wellness. We see this also because I mentioned IBS. I want to talk about this with specific respect to digestive distress. So irritable bowel syndrome is classified as a disorder of gut-brain communication. And if any of you have IBS like I do, you probably have a first-hand account of just how disordered that gut-brain communication can be. Anxiety can greatly alter your gut motility or how the gut moves. And we see for people with IBS specifically that there is a much higher prevalence of depression and anxiety in those with irritable bowel syndrome than those without it. And you might be wondering, which is the chicken and which is the egg in this scenario? And the research has some conflicting results, but there are some studies that suggest it is the changes in the gut that precede the changes in the brain. In one research study in particular, it was estimated that 2/3 of the time it was the IBS happening before the depression or anxiety came about. So this really does get you thinking about how our body is so interconnected. We often think of, our brain as being separate from the rest of us, or our digestion as being separate from our immune system, or being separate from our cardiovascular system. But really, everything in this miraculous body of ours is connected. So if you are looking to support, protect, enhance your mental well-being, it makes perfect sense, along with all of the other things you're doing, like social support and talking to a trusted therapist to also take care of your microbiome. So what are the ways that you can do that? My number one recommendation, of course, is always to eat more plants. Not only is eating more fruits and vegetables associated with positive mental outlook, but the fiber that plant foods contain is so important for driving the growth of beneficial microbiota in the digestive tract. You also want to consider choosing more plant proteins over animal proteins. And the reason for this is that choosing more plant proteins, yes, increases your fiber intake, but it will also decrease your intake of particularly saturated fat. While I know there's a lot of controversy about the health benefits or the detrimental effects of saturated fat, when it comes to your gut inflammation and the integrity of your gut barrier, too much saturated fat appears to increase the amount of leakiness or gut barrier dysfunction and the resulting transfer of something called bacterioendotoxin. So these are fragments of bacteria that, if they escape your gut and they enter up in your circulation, can actually increase inflammation. And that's definitely not something you want if you're working on your mental well-being. So eat those legumes, eat that tofu, that tempeh, get more plant proteins on your plate more often. Even if you still eat some meat from time to time, get those plants on your plate. And then, of course, what's the third thing that I would recommend if you want to support a healthy microbiota? Probiotics. For my friends in Canada, BioK has a great 25 billion, it's called regular dose for daily care. It's so easy to fit into your everyday activities. And for my friends in the States, we have the 30 billion daily care. So it's a great everyday dose to just protect and reinforce your digestive well-being and show all those trillions of microbes in your gut a little love for your second brain.